Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. The main character, after dying in his previous life, gets reborn inside of Marvel. Marvel is a very famous American comic book series. It contains many superheroes, including Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Captain America.
Marvel, what if I am reborn as Killer Sands? Chapter 1, Waking in a War Zone. I opened my eyes to fire. No, not fire, wreckage. Metal and smoke curling into a sky split open by alien ships. The ground shook beneath me. I smelled something burnt, sharp like fuel and ozone. I coughed before remembering I didn't need to. My throat didn't hurt. My chest didn't move. My fingers scraped the asphalt, and the sound that came back wasn't skin, it was bone. What the hell? My voice was wrong. Rough, low, drawling like a tired laugh waiting to happen. The sound of it froze me. I looked down, and there was no skin, no blood, just white, jointed fingers, bony hands, a jacket black as tar with red trim. My chest had that old familiar insignia burned into the fabric. The red eye flickered in my left socket. It hummed, steady, powerful, alive. I'd seen this before. Not in a mirror, on a screen. Killer Sands. The name hit me harder than the explosions echoing down the street. I had been human, a normal guy. The last thing I remembered was headlights, tires screeching, pain. Then nothing. Then this. I stood slowly, the street spinning around me. Buildings half torn apart, people screaming, cars overturned. Smoke in the air so thick it strung even though I didn't breathe. I clenched my hands, watching faint red light leak from the joints of my fingers. My voice came out again, steadier. Heh, guess I ain't in Kansas anymore. A streak of blue light shot overhead, followed by a shape that landed hard on a taxi a few meters away, red and gold armor, shining even through the soot. Iron Man. I didn't need to guess. I knew that faceplate. The real one, not CGI, not drawn panels. He turned, scanning me. You need to get out of here. Civilians are being evacuated down 7th Avenue. I tilted my skull, the permanent grin locked in place. Civilians. Nah, don't think that word fits me anymore. His mask tilted slightly. You in costume. This isn't Comic-Con, pal. Heh, yeah, no kidding. I stepped forward, bones clicking. My steps left faint glowing prints on the asphalt. I didn't even try to hide it. I could feel the energy pulsing through me, violent and hungry. The same kind of energy that used to make the screen shake when Killer Sands used his blasters. Another explosion tore the sky open. Iron Man's attention snapped upward. One of those flying aliens, Chitauri, my brain supplied, dove toward us. I reacted before I could think. A red bone spear snapped into existence from my hand, glowing hot, and shot straight through the alien. The body fell smoking to the street. Iron Man froze. What the hell was that? I looked down at my hand, the last of the red energy fading. Heh, guess I still got it. He aimed his repulsor at me. Who are you? I turned my skull toward him, light flickering in my socket. Just a guy who woke up in the wrong place. The moment hung there, his weapon trained on me, me staring right back, the city breaking apart around us. Then his comm clicked. Stark, we need air support on Broadway. He looked between me and the smoke rising nearby. Don't do anything stupid. I grinned wider. Buddy, stupid's kind of my thing. He blasted into the air, leaving a rush of hot exhaust behind. I watched him disappear over the skyline. The glow in my eye dimmed, and for a second I just stood there. My mind was racing, but it wasn't panic. It was calculation. So this was the Battle of New York. That meant Loki was somewhere on top of Stark Tower, the Tesseract portal was still open, and the Avengers hadn't closed it yet. I remembered every frame of it, the army, the nuke, Tony's dive through the wormhole. I knew how it ended. But standing here, seeing it happen, smelling it, hearing the screams, that was different. And I wasn't human anymore. I could feel the weight of my new power. The control came easy, like it belonged to me. Bones, blasters, short-range teleports, It all sat under my skin, waiting for a reason. I flexed my hands. Heck, well, if I'm here, might as well play along. A shadow passed over me. 3 Chitauri on gliders swooped low, firing blue bolts into the street. I sidestepped, bones spinning out from my hand, forming a wall. The blasts hit, throwing sparks. I snapped my fingers. The wall burst forward in spikes, catching 2 of them midair. They exploded in shrapnel. The last one veered away. I teleported behind it with a single blink, hand glowing red. I slammed a bone spear through its chest. The glider twisted and crashed into a parked car. I landed in front of it. My jacket fluttered from the heat. Guess this city needed a new kind of skeleton crew, I said under my breath. The woman who had been hiding behind the car stared at me, eyes wide. WH, what are you? Just passing through, I said, voice low. Go find somewhere safe. She nodded and ran. I could hear the Avengers shouting somewhere farther uptown, Cap giving orders, Thor's hammer shaking windows, the Hulk roaring. I followed the noise, moving through the wreckage. People kept glancing at me, not sure whether I was helping or part of the invasion. Couldn't blame them. I looked like something that crawled out of a nightmare. Another group of Chitauri dropped from a hovercraft. They aimed their weapons, but I was already moving. Bones shot from the ground, skewering 2 before they fired. I teleported behind the others, grabbed one by the throat, and slammed its head into the pavement hard enough to crack it. The sound echoed down the street. A voice came from behind me. Nice trick. I turned. Captain America was there, shield on his arm, uniform torn, face dirty. He looked at me with that same mix of confusion and focus he gave anyone he didn't understand but needed to trust for a minute. You with us? He asked. I tilted my head. Heh, guess that depends on who us is. Human. Not anymore. He didn't have time to question it. A Chitauri energy blast hit his shield, throwing sparks. He blocked, deflected, and threw the shield, cutting through 2 aliens before it returned to him. I raised a hand and fired 3 bone projectiles over his shoulder, taking out the rest. He looked back at me, nodding once. Good shot. I shrugged. Heh, I got good aim. Stick with me then. We're regrouping by Stark Tower. Lead the way, Stripes. We ran through the smoke and rubble. He moved fast, precise, like every step was part of a plan. I followed easily, teleporting over debris when I needed to. He glanced back once when I blinked from one side of a wreck to the other, but didn't slow down. We reached a cross street where Black Widow was guiding civilians. She looked up, eyes narrowing when she saw me. Cap, what the hell is that? He's helping, he said shortly. She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Fine, keep him on your side. Heh, don't worry, Red. I bite only when I wanna. She didn't react. Focus on the enemy. The next hour was chaos. I fought alongside them, a literal skeleton with red energy pouring out of my eye, throwing bones and blasts while the Avengers tore through the invaders. Every time I used my power, I felt it drain something that wasn't stamina but will. Killer Sands' energy was emotion-driven, that much I remembered. Anger and intent made it stronger. When the Leviathan came, that massive serpent-like ship, I watched it crash through the street. Hulk and Thor brought it down like in the movie, only this time I was close enough to feel the ground shake from its impact. I couldn't help the low chuckle that came out. Guess I'm part of the main event now. Tony's voice came over their comms. I could hear it faintly through Cap's receiver. Heads up, Cap, I've got a nuke inbound. I'm taking it to the portal. Cap looked grim. Stark, you know what you're doing. I muttered, he doesn't make it back right away. Cap turned to me. What? Nothing, just keep your eyes on the sky. I watched Tony fly upward with the missile. The portal glowed brighter, my sockets narrowed. In the movie it had been a clean save. The missile destroyed the fleet, the portal closed, and Tony barely made it back. But this wasn't a movie anymore. I wasn't going to assume the same outcome. I teleported to the top of a nearby building, bones crunching under my boots as I landed. The view stretched out across the battlefield. I could see the wormhole above Stark Tower, the blue light spilling across the clouds. Tony disappeared into it. Seconds stretched. The nuke went off, a flash in the distance. The portal began to close, slow at first, then faster. I could see Thor and Cap looking up. I clenched my fist, energy sparking. If something went wrong, I could grab him, pull him out with a shortcut through space. My portals weren't built for that distance, but it was better than watching him burn. The body fell through the sky. Iron Man's armor was limp, falling too fast. I snapped my fingers. A portal burst open beneath him, catching the drop and redirecting him down onto the street near the others. The shockwave blew out windows for half a block. Hulk roared and ran over to pull the mask off. Tony gasped for air, alive. I stood above them, watching from the rooftop, smoke curling around me. Cap looked up, meeting my glowing red eye for a moment. I raised a hand in a lazy salute. Then I teleported away before they could ask questions. I landed in an alley a few blocks over. The world was still shaking, sirens everywhere. I leaned back against a wall, the cold brick scraping my spine. My red eye dimmed again. Heh, not bad for a first day. I looked at my hands, flexing them. The bones gleamed faintly in the dark. Killer Sans. I'd seen him as a character, a villain, a symbol. Now it was me. I could feel the memories of that digital version echo faintly, not as thoughts but instincts. He didn't regret, didn't hesitate. Maybe that was why it felt natural. And Marvel, yeah, I knew this world too. Every timeline, every villain that came after. Thanos, Ultron, Sokovia, Civil War. I had all the knowledge I needed to survive. Maybe even shape things if I wanted. But for now, I just wanted to move. I started walking toward the edge of the city, boots clicking softly against broken pavement. Smoke drifted through the air. Above me, the last Chitauri craft fell apart and burned. The cheering had already started somewhere in the distance. Guess I'm part of the team now, I said to myself. The grin on my face didn't change, couldn't change, but the sound of my laugh echoed low and steady down the alley, like the city itself was laughing with me. Chapter 2. Streets After the Storm. The noise hadn't stopped yet. Sirens screamed from every direction, helicopters chopped the air overhead, and the streets smelled like ash and fuel. The big stuff was over, the portal closed, the aliens gone, but the cleanup had just started. I stood by a half-destroyed car, watching a column of smoke twist up between two buildings. My red eye flickered weakly. The fight had drained me more than I thought. Heh, guess I went a little overboard, I muttered. My voice rasped like it always did, calm but rough, like a lazy laugh hiding in the back of my throat. People were walking past in a daze. Some were bleeding, some just staring at the sky. None of them looked at me for more than a second. Maybe they thought I was part of the debris. Bones didn't exactly blend in, but most of them had seen worse today. I flexed my hand. The red light pulsed through the joints, bright and steady again. It was good to know I still had control. Footsteps crunched on the broken glass behind me. "You're not going anywhere yet," a woman's voice said. I turned slowly. Natasha Romanoff stood a few feet away, gun drawn but lowered. She looked tired, dirt on her cheek, uniform ripped at the sleeve. Her eyes didn't leave me for a second. "Heh, you again," I said, tilting my skull. "Didn't think the redhead would come looking for me this fast." "Captain said you disappeared after the fight. You were teleporting all over the place. Hard not to notice," she said evenly. "What are you?" "Skeleton, thought that part was obvious." I spread my arms and shrugged. Her expression didn't change. "You helped us. That keeps my finger off the trigger, for now." "Generous of you." Behind her, someone else walked out of the smoke. Captain America, shield strapped on his back, uniform torn but still standing straight. His face looked worn, like he'd seen one too many wars in one day. "Romanoff," he said quietly, "stand down." She holstered the gun, but stayed ready. Cap stepped closer, stopping a few paces from me. "You saved a lot of people out there. Tony said you caught him when he fell." Heh, yeah, couldn't let the shiny guy splatter on the road. Would have ruined the paint. Cap gave a small nod. We appreciate it. I leaned back against the car, arms crossed. No problem, soldier boy. Just didn't like seeing the city get wrecked more than it already was. He looked me over. You're not human. Sharp observation. Alien. Closer to monster, I guess. Natasha spoke again. You were using energy constructs, not tech, not magic either. Stark ran scans, readings don't match anything we've seen. Heh, guess I'm special. Where did you come from? She pressed. I looked past her at the skyline. Smoke rising, people crying, soldiers trying to clear rubble. Does it matter? It matters if we're supposed to trust you, she said. Cap folded his arms. She's right. You showed up out of nowhere with powers that match nothing on record. That makes you a concern. I let out a short laugh. Concern, huh? You should be used to that by now. Aliens, gods, green rage monsters. What's one more freak in the pile? He frowned slightly. We're not calling you a threat, but we need to know what side you're on. I ain't on any side, I said simply. I just fight the ones who deserve it. Who decides that? Natasha asked. I looked at her. I do. The silence stretched for a few seconds. She didn't blink. Cap didn't move. The tension sat there, quiet but thick. Then he sighed. We're regrouping at Stark Tower. You should come with us, he said. We'll figure this out together. I tilted my head. And let your boss put me in a box. Nah, I'm good. No one's putting you in a box, he said calmly. We just need answers. Heh, that's what everyone says before the cage door slams. Natasha's tone stayed level. You don't trust us. Would you, I asked, if you woke up looking like this? Her eyes softened a fraction. No, I wouldn't. Cap adjusted his gloves. We're not enemies. But if you walk away now, SHIELD will send a whole team after you. I'd rather avoid that. I could tell he meant it. He wasn't bluffing. He didn't bluff, not his style. I leaned off the car and stepped closer, enough for him to see the red light flaring in my eye. He didn't flinch. You really think your team could handle me? I asked quietly. I think they'd try, he said, steady. I chuckled, the sound dry and low. Heh, you got guts, I'll give you that. Another rumble echoed in the distance, something collapsing. I turned to look. Emergency lights flashed across the street, blue and red blending in the smoke. The city looked like a ghost of itself. Cap took a breath. We can talk here if you prefer. I looked back at him. All right, soldier, talk. He nodded to Natasha, and she stepped back slightly, letting him lead. You fought well out there. You didn't hesitate to save civilians. You worked with us when it counted. That says something. I tapped the side of my skull. Just do what needs doing. Simple as that. What's your name? He asked. Killer Sands. He blinked once. Killer. That's what they call me. Natasha's eyebrow twitched. You expect us to believe that's your actual name. Heh, believe what you want. It's what I answer to. Cap studied me for a moment, then said quietly, if you wanted to hurt people, you had plenty of chances. You didn't. Yeah, well, I said, looking down the street. I guess I'm trying something new. Natasha crossed her arms. You don't sound like someone new to fighting. Guess you're right about that. Cap looked at the fires still burning. We could use someone with your skill set. Not everyone can take on those aliens like that. I laughed lightly. You want me on your team already. You move fast. He smiled faintly. You wouldn't be the first wild card we've worked with. I tilted my head. And what would you have me do, Cap? Wear the flag, smile for cameras. He shook his head. Just do what you did today. Help when it counts. I thought about it for a second, letting the idea hang there. The red light in my socket pulsed once. Maybe, I said finally. Natasha's radio crackled. Romanoff, Barton needs support at the perimeter. Evac zone secure. She touched her earpiece. Almost. We're finishing up. She looked at me again. You going to disappear on us again? Heh, maybe. Don't, she said simply. Why that? Because the next time SHILD spots you, they'll come in hot. Let us handle the talking first. I smirked, or as much as a skull could. You offering protection. Call it advice. Cap nodded once. You've earned that much. I looked between them. They were both serious, no bluff, no threat behind it. For soldiers like them, that meant something. Heh, all right, I'll play nice, I said, lowering my voice a bit. For now. Natasha's posture eased slightly. That's all we need. Cap extended a hand. Then let's start over. Thank you for your help. I stared at the hand for a second. His glove was dirty, streaked with soot. I reached out slowly and shook it. My bones clicked softly against the leather. Heh, you're welcome, soldier boy. He nodded once. We'll be in touch. They turned to leave, heading back toward the group of agents gathering at the end of the block. I watched them go, hands in my pockets, jacket moving with the breeze from a passing helicopter. When they were out of sight, I looked up at the sky again. The clouds were clearing, stars barely visible through the haze. The red light in my eye dimmed until it was just a faint glow. Guess I made an impression, I said quietly. The street was almost empty now. I started walking, boots tapping against the pavement, stepping over cracks and broken glass. Every step sounded loud in the quiet that followed the chaos. A soldier glanced up as I passed, but didn't stop me. Maybe Cap had already said something on comms. Either way, no one got in my way. I moved until the noise faded behind me and the street opened into a quieter block. Fire trucks lined the corners, hoses still spraying down smoking ruins. I stopped beside a shattered storefront and looked at my reflection in the glass. White bone, empty grin, one red eye glowing faintly. I tilted my head. Heh, you really outdid yourself this time. A child nearby pointed at me. Mom, look, a skeleton. His mother pulled him close quickly, whispering something and leading him away. I watched them go. The kid looked back once, curious but not afraid. I gave a small wave, and he waved back before turning the corner. It made me chuckle, quietly. The night dragged on. Helicopters came and went. Teams searched for survivors. I stayed out of their way, just watching. A few agents pointed at me, talking into radios, but no one approached, probably because of Cap. He had that kind of pull. I found a spot under a broken streetlight and sat down on a chunk of concrete. The city was still glowing from fires, but it was settling down. I leaned back, resting my skull against the cool metal of the post. The red eye flickered once, slow and steady. Heh, not bad for day one, I said quietly. Chapter 3, Morning after the fire. The city hadn't slept. Even with the portal gone, with the sky back to grey instead of blue fire, everything still hummed. Sirens, radios, the low grind of trucks moving debris. I sat on the edge of a collapsed billboard that hung over what used to be a clothing store, one leg dangling, one bent. The smell of smoke stuck to everything. My eye flickered weakly, half bright, steadying each time I blinked it on. Heh, guess the humans still got some fight left in M, I said to no one. My voice came out the same as ever, low, rough, a lazy rasp that sat between tired amusement and something colder. Down below, people were cleaning up. Agents in dark suits talked into radios, soldiers moved chunks of metal. Someone was yelling about radiation levels from the wreckage. Nobody looked up. I turned my skull toward the rising sun. Light hit the buildings, cutting through the leftover dust. It made the ruins look clean for half a second before fading again. I didn't need the light, but I liked the quiet. I heard the repulsor sound before I saw it, a smooth whine that built up fast, familiar from last night. I didn't move. A shadow passed across the rubble, then Iron Man landed about 20 feet away, shoulder plates scratched and bent. The armor looked rough, not patched yet. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, scanning. Then the mask peeled back with a hiss. Tony Stark's face appeared, tired eyes, a day's worth of stubble, mouth set in that usual mix of confidence and irritation. "Well," he said, voice flat, "you're hard to find." "Heh, I get that a lot." I leaned forward a little, elbows on my knees. "You the welcoming committee, or you just here to give me a medal?" He walked closer, boots crunching over broken glass. "You saved my life. And yeah," I looked at the playback, "that wasn't a dream. You actually teleported me mid-fall and dropped me nice and gentle, which means you knew what was happening before I hit the pavement." I tilted my head. "Lucky guess." "Sure." He looked me over like he was inspecting a machine. "You don't breathe, you don't blink, you glow like a Christmas ornament, and your voice sounds like gravel running through a fan. You're not one of mine, so I want to know what you are." "Skeleton," I said easily. "Thought we covered that part." "Yeah, no. I mean, what kind of power source, tech, whatever's making your bones light up?" "JARVIS says it's energy, but not arc, not gamma, not anything I can chart." I looked at my hand and flexed it, the red light running through the joints. "Guess your machine's not as smart as you thought." He smirked faintly. "Cute. You've got the same attitude as a few of my suits before I debug them." "Heh, maybe they learned it from me." He raised an eyebrow. "You got jokes. Good. Keeps me interested." He took another step closer, the armor panels shifting with a small mechanical hiss. "So, do I call you Mr. Skeleton, or do you have an actual name?" "Killer Sands," I said simply. His mouth twitched. "That's either a bad alias or a red flag." "Both," I said. He looked me up and down again. "And what's with the jacket? Black leather, red trim, not exactly subtle." "Didn't pick it for stealth," I said. He nodded slowly. "You talk like a bad cop movie." "Heh, I talk like me." For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The wind moved dust around our feet. Tony glanced toward the skyline, toward the tower that still carried his name near the top. "You know, normally I'd have about a dozen SHIELD agents here with me, but Fury's in one of his moods." He said, and I quote, "If Stark wants to poke the radioactive skeleton, let him." So here I am. I laughed quietly. "You humans sure know how to make someone feel welcome." "Yeah, well, you did appear in the middle of an alien invasion." "I was just passing through." He gave me that same half smile he used when he didn't buy a word. "Passing through. You pick a war zone for a stroll." "Guess I got good timing." He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and leaned slightly against a half-melted car door. "You're not giving me much, Bone Boy. I'm trying to decide if you're one of Loki's rejects or if you're something new entirely." "Loki, S too dramatic for me," I said. "Yeah, you don't strike me as a cape guy." I shrugged. "Heh, I don't strike as anyone's guy." He crossed his arms. "Right, so you save me, then disappear before we can say thanks. Then Cap reports you talking in riddles and teleporting like a glitch. You see why I'm a little curious." I looked at him steady. "Curiosity's fine, just don't poke too hard." He raised both eyebrows. "Is that a threat?" "Heh, advice." He watched me for a long second, then smiled thinly. "Noted." A gust of wind kicked up some ash between us. He tapped a control on his wrist. The armor shifted slightly, small panels realigning. "So, what do you eat? Calcium?" I grinned wider. "Heh, souls mostly." His hand paused mid-gesture. "You're joking." "Maybe." He let out a short laugh. "You're actually funny. Great. The universe drops a stand-up skeleton into my city. What's next? A talking raccoon?" "Don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to." "Good point." He looked down at the street for a moment, then back up. "You know, you could help us. We could use someone who can warp around like that. Beats flying through traffic." I tilted my head. "You trust me already." "I trust results," he said. "You saved me, helped the team, didn't kill anybody that didn't deserve it. That's a decent resume." "Heh, I don't do teams." He chuckled quietly. "Yeah, I said that once too. Didn't stick." Not my problem. He kicked a chunk of stone idly. You planning to stay in the city? For a bit. Mind if I run a few tests? I looked at him flatly. You touch me with a needle, and I'll shove your suit inside out. He raised his hands, smiling. Relax. Non-invasive scans only, I promise. You stand still. I point some harmless light at you. We both walk away alive. Heh, tempting. He shrugged. Curiosity's a hell of a habit. I gotta know how you work. I looked around the broken street, then back at him. You already built armor that flies, shoots beams, and survives nukes. Isn't that enough? He shook his head. Not even close. The second I stop building, something worse shows up. Knowing what makes you tick could help next time some alien decides to redecorate Manhattan. I tapped my skull lightly with one finger. You never stop, huh? Can't afford to. I leaned back again, legs still dangling over the edge. Hef, fine, one scan. You get your data, then I disappear again. He smirked. Deal. He tapped a sequence on his wrist. Small drones detached from the armor, floating out around me in a slow circle. Blue lines traced over my body, scanning silently. Hold still, he said. I didn't move. The drones clicked softly as they adjusted positions. Okay, he murmured, eyes on the holographic display floating from his wrist. That's not possible. You've got energy flow without a source, like an internal reactor, but there's no mass signature. Heh, told you I'm special. This isn't energy generation. It's like you're pulling from somewhere else. Spatial distortion, constant regeneration loop. He stopped himself, frowning. I don't even have a category for that. Then make one, I said. He looked at me over the projection. You don't even care what I find, do you? Not really. He shut down the hologram. The drones zipped back into his suit. You're either the calmest guy I've met or completely insane. Maybe both. He sighed. Fury's gonna want to talk to you. Heh, let him want. You realize he doesn't take no for an answer, right? Everyone takes no eventually. He chuckled. All right, tough guy. I'll tell him you're thinking about it. I shrugged. Do what you want. He stepped back, folding his arms again. You know, you're weirdly likable for a skeleton. I get that sometimes. He looked thoughtful for a moment. You ever consider what you could do with this power if you worked with us? Not under us, with us. We've got aliens, gods, monsters. Could use a skeleton to round out the collection. I chuckled. You make it sound like a circus. Yeah, but it pays well, he said dryly. Hey, I'll pass. Not my scene. He nodded slowly. Can't say I didn't try. He turned as if to leave, but hesitated. One last thing. Why'd you save me? You didn't know me. You could have let me fall. I looked at him, voice even. Didn't like the look of you splattered across the road. Simple as that. He studied me for a moment longer, then smiled slightly. Guess I owe you one. You can start by getting me breakfast, I said. He laughed softly. You eat. Not really, but I like watching people panic when they see me in a diner. He grinned. You're a menace. I try. He pressed a command on his wrist, and the faceplate slid back into place. All right, bone boy, don't disappear too far. Something tells me we'll cross paths again. Heh, I'll be around. He lifted off, the blast from the repulsors kicking up dust around me. I watched him rise, vanish into the clouds. When the noise faded, the street went quiet again, except for the distant hum of engines and the murmur of people still rebuilding. I stayed there another few minutes before sliding off the billboard edge, landing lightly on the pavement. My steps echoed as I walked toward the next block, hands in my pockets, jacket brushing the air behind me. The red glow in my socket pulsed steady and slow. Hey, guess the fun, it's not over yet. I kept walking, the sound of my boots mixing with the faint rhythm of the city waking back up. Chapter 4. Morning on broken streets. The next morning hit slow. The sun tried to cut through the haze but didn't make it far. Manhattan still smelled like burnt fuel and concrete dust. Every street corner had someone sweeping glass or carrying a box of supplies. I walked with my hands in my jacket pockets, hood down, just another shadow moving through the mess. Heh, guess it's cleanup day, I said under my breath. My voice came out low and rough, that lazy half-grin sound I could never get rid of. A construction drone hovered by, scanning debris. I ignored it and kept walking. People didn't pay much attention. The city was used to weird after yesterday. Someone muttered something about cosplay, someone else took a picture, then went back to stacking bricks. A block ahead, I spotted a familiar shape, blue uniform, shield slung over the back, sleeves rolled up. Steve Rogers, talking quietly to a group of soldiers helping a family out of a crushed cab. He looked the same as last night, tired, calm, polite to everyone. I stopped for a second, watching him hand a kid a bottle of water before waving the soldiers toward the next car. He turned then, probably hearing my steps. His eyes narrowed just slightly, then relaxed when he recognized me. "Morning," he said. His tone was neutral, friendly, but cautious. "Heh, morning, soldier boy," I answered. He walked over, hands resting against his belt. "Didn't think I'd see you again this soon." "Didn't plan on it," I said. "Just taking a walk. Figured I'd check out the aftermath." He nodded slowly, looking around at the mess. "It's bad, but could have been worse." "Yeah, could have been a crater." He gave a short exhale, like a small laugh. "You're not wrong." I looked at the workers sweeping glass near us. "You always this hands-on. Thought the big guy with the hammer would handle cleanup." "He's helping too," Steve said. "But most of this is just people. They don't need a hammer for that." "Heh, guess you're the type who likes to help rebuild what gets broken." "Somebody has to," he said quietly. I could see him measuring me again, the same way he had yesterday, not with suspicion, just curiosity. "You sticking around?" "Maybe. Depends who tries to shoot me first." He smiled faintly. "They won't. I talked to Fury." "Hey, bet that was a fun chat." "Let's just say he's keeping an eye on you, but agreed to give you space." "Space is all I need," I said. He nodded once, then looked toward the skyline again. "Stark said you let him scan you." "Yeah, he wouldn't stop asking." "He means well," Steve said. "He means curiosity with a metal suit," I replied. That made him chuckle softly. "That's one way to put it." For a while, neither of us said anything. A truck rolled by carrying scrap metal, men shouting directions. The noise filled the space between us. Then Steve spoke again. "You fought hard. You didn't have to, but you did." I shrugged. Didn't like the invaders. Simple as that. "Still," he said, "I'm grateful." "Heh, guess you're the polite type, even after a war." He smiled. "Old habits." I tilted my head. "You ever stop, or you just keep going till you drop?" He gave a small smile, but didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You seem like you've seen a few fights yourself." "More than a few," I said. He looked me over once more. "You ever get tired of it?" I grinned wider. "Not really. Gives me something to do." He laughed quietly through his nose, the kind of short sound that came more from recognition than humor. "If you ever change your mind about helping officially, you know where to find us." "Heh, I'll think about it." He adjusted his shield strap and nodded toward a group of kids waving at him. "I should get back to work." "Yeah, you got fans," I said lightly. He turned to leave, then looked back once. "You're all right, Sans." I gave a lazy wave. "You too, soldier boy." He smiled faintly, then walked off toward the next block, already talking to someone about supplies. I watched him for a second longer, then turned the other way. The farther I walked, the quieter it got. The crowds thinned out. The buildings started looking older, rougher. Hell's Kitchen wasn't far, you could feel it before you saw the signs. Narrow streets, flickering lights, the smell of cheap food mixing with damp brick. the kind of place that stayed awake even when the rest of the city tried to rest. Heh, figures I'd end up here, I muttered. I followed the sound of shouting down an alley, two guys arguing, a bottle breaking. I turned the corner and saw one of them running, clutching his arm. The other lay on the ground, groaning. A figure in red stood above him, mask smooth, batons in hand. Daredevil. He turned his head slightly, sensing me before I made a sound. His stance shifted. "You're not a civilian." His voice was calm, controlled. "Hey, good ears," I said. He faced me directly, head tilted. "You're the one the news mentioned, the skeleton." "Yeah, that's me." He listened to my tone for a moment before speaking again. "You don't sound hostile." "I ain't," I said, "just walking." "You picked a bad neighborhood for sightseeing," he said. "I like the noise." He stepped closer, his movement deliberate. "You're not human. You got good instincts." "Does SHILD know you're here?" he asked. "Heh, probably. They love watching me." He didn't react to the joke. "You fought in the battle yesterday." "Yeah, killed a few aliens, saved a few people. Normal day." He crouched by the man on the ground, checking his pulse before tying his wrists with a zip cord from his belt. "You don't sound like you're lying." "Not my style." He stood again, facing me. "You planning to stay in New York?" "Maybe. Depends how the city feels." "Then you'll have to stay out of my way." "Heh, relax, Red. I ain't looking to mess with your little turf." He tilted his head. "You know who I am. Daredevil, vigilante, lawyer by day, hero by night," I said casually. He froze for half a second before replying. "That's a dangerous guess." "Wasn't a guess," I said evilly. He tightened his grip on the batons slightly. "How do you know that?" "I hear things," I said. He stood there silent for a moment, then lowered his weapons slightly. "If you wanted to expose me, you'd have done it already." "Hey, don't care enough. Not my business." "Then why come here?" he asked. "Looking for a place to disappear for a while." "This neighborhood eats people like that alive," he said. "I'm not easy to eat." He didn't smile, but his stance loosened. "You talk like you've seen worse." "Yeah," I said, "a lot worse." He nodded once. "You don't radiate hostility, I can tell, but the energy coming off you, it's not normal, it's not magic either." "Heh, guess I'm unique." "Unique can be dangerous," he said quietly. "Only if you pick the wrong fight." He turned slightly, listening to something above us, a police siren far off, echoing down the block. "If you plan on staying, keep your head down. The city's full of people who don't ask questions until it's too late." "Appreciate the advice," I said. He stepped closer, his boots quiet on the pavement. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Someone who hides behind jokes to keep people from looking too close." "Heh, maybe. Or maybe I just like jokes." He studied me for another moment, then said, "If you're going to stay, don't cause trouble." "Can't promise that," I said. He sighed softly. "Then at least aim it at the right people." I laughed quietly. "We'll see, Red." He turned away, climbing the fire escape in smooth movements. "This city doesn't need another threat," he said without looking back. "Good thing I'm not one," I replied. He paused halfway up, then kept climbing. Within seconds he was gone, moving across the rooftops like a shadow. I looked down at the man he'd left tied up, still groaning. "Heh, guess the devil's got manners after all." I started walking again, heading deeper into the kitchen. The buildings leaned closer together here, light cutting in narrow lines through the gaps. The air felt heavier. I passed a few people who didn't bother staring. They'd seen stranger things than me. At the corner of a diner that somehow still had its windows intact, I stopped. Inside, a tired waiter wiped a counter while the radio played soft jazz. I could smell coffee from outside. "Heh, why not?" I muttered and pushed the door open. The bell jingled weakly. The few people inside looked up, froze, then went back to eating after a second. The waiter blinked but didn't say anything. I sat at the counter, the stool creaking under my weight. "Coffee," I said. He nodded wordlessly, poured a cup, and slid it over. I wrapped my bony fingers around it, feeling the heat radiate through the porcelain. Didn't need it, still liked it. Outside, a siren wailed again and faded into the distance. I took a slow sip anyway, the steam curling between my teeth. New York never changes. Chapter 5. Night in Hell's Kitchen. The city changed after dark. The same streets that looked tired in daylight came alive with the kind of noise that only Hell's Kitchen could make: engines, shouting, music leaking from windows. I walked without much aim, hands buried in my jacket pockets, one eye socket glowing faintly under the streetlights. People moved around me without looking too close. Nobody wanted to. The city had seen enough strange faces lately. A skeleton in a coat wasn't even top 10 anymore. I turned down an alley, the kind that smelled like old oil and wet concrete. A cat hissed and bolted across the trash. The sound of laughter carried from somewhere up the block, low and rough, not the kind of laughter that came from a good joke. Guess trouble's clocked in, I muttered, voice the same cracked rasp as always. I could hear boots scuffing pavement before I saw them. 4 men, big, moving in sync like they'd done this before. Cheap suits, heavy coats, pistols half hidden but ready. Fisk's men, you could tell by how they didn't look nervous even though they should have. One of them called out, "You the skeleton everyone's talking about." Depends who's talking, I said. The one in front smirked. "The boss wants to know what you are. We figure you come quietly, we all get to keep breathing." I stepped into the yellow light leaking from a flickering sign. The glow from my eye sharpened, throwing red against the brick wall. Yeah, not in the mood for field trips. He raised his chin, signaling the others. "You got a smart mouth for a bag of bones." You'd be surprised what else I got. The first shot cracked the air. The bullet hit my chest and bounced off the jacket like it hit steel. The sound made them all freeze for a split second. I looked down, brushed at the scorch mark with my fingers, then looked back up. "That's cute," I said. 2 more fired, panicked now. I raised my hand. Red bones burst from the ground in a tight arc, deflecting every round. One of them yelped as a shard of glowing energy scraped his arm. He's doing magic or something," one shouted. I walked forward slow, each step echoing. "Magic, huh? Let's call it bad news." They backed up. The leader gritted his teeth and yelled, "Light him up." They all opened fire at once. Sparks lit the alley. Bullets ricocheted off red barriers that appeared and disappeared like flickers of flame. I didn't bother dodging much. I just lifted a hand, and a glowing blaster materialized beside me, hovering shoulder high. The next volley of shots vanished into the red flash that followed. When the smoke cleared, their guns were in pieces on the ground. The one closest to me fell back, scrambling for a knife. Stay back." I sighed. Wrong move." A bone blade extended from my hand in a clean line. I swung once, hitting his weapon hand just hard enough to make him drop it. He yelled, clutching his wrist. The leader stumbled backward, eyes wide. "What are you?" "Skeleton," I said simply. The red light in my socket brightened. They all froze. I didn't need to say anything else. I could feel their fear settle like heat in the air. The leader swallowed. "The boss ain't gonna like this." "Tell him to visit," I said. "We'll chat." He looked like he wanted to say something more, but thought better of it. He grabbed the others and ran, half dragging the one with the hurt wrist. I watched until they disappeared around the corner. That was boring," I muttered. The street went quiet again, except for the distant hum of cars. I turned and kept walking. By the time I reached the next block, the city felt normal again, if Hell's Kitchen ever counted as normal. I could hear a TV somewhere above, muffled voices from a bar down the street. I stopped at the corner, leaned against a wall, and pulled my hood up. My red eye dimmed until it was barely visible. I liked the dark. It made the glow less obvious. For a while I just listened. Somewhere a siren passed. Somewhere else a bottle broke. Life kept going. Then a black SUV turned the corner slow, headlights cutting through the dark. It stopped halfway down the block. Doors opened quietly. More men, better armed, heavier steps. They weren't amateurs this time. "Heh, guess he didn't like the message," I said softly. They spread out, 6 in total, wearing vests and carrying automatic rifles. The one in front spoke through a small headset. "Target acquired. Proceeding." They didn't shoot right away. Smart. They were looking for a reaction. I didn't give them one. One of them moved closer, lifting his weapon. "We don't want to make this messy. You come in, the boss might let you keep that grin." I looked up slowly. "Hey, that's generous." "You gonna make this hard?" he asked. "Always do." The alley lit up again with gunfire. This time I teleported one blink, and I was behind them. My hand flicked, and red bones erupted from the asphalt in a wide sweep, knocking half of them off their feet. The others spun around, shouting. One of them managed to fire a burst. I raised my arm. The bullets froze midair, hanging in front of me, glowing faintly. I snapped my fingers and they turned, flying back into the shooter's gun, jamming it hard enough to spark. He dropped it, cursing. Another lunged with a baton. I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and slammed him against the wall. "Bad idea," I said quietly before tossing him aside. The last 2 tried to retreat, yelling into their radios. I didn't bother chasing them. I summoned 2 blasters overhead, aimed at the ground between them, and fired once. The explosion sent them sprawling but left them alive. When the dust settled, I stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by groaning men and broken weapons. The glow in my eye dimmed again. "Heh, tell your boss to pick better messengers," I said. No one answered. They were all too busy trying to breathe. I turned and started walking again, slipping out of the alley before the sirens got closer. The next few blocks were quieter. I passed an open store where an old man was sweeping the front steps. He looked up as I passed, startled, then hesitated. "You one of those heroes?" "Heh, something like that," I said without stopping. "Keep the streets clean, then," he muttered. "Working on it." I reached the end of the block and stopped. The rooftops above shimmered with faint movement, shadows crossing, watching. Fisk's eyes were everywhere. "Heh, you don't give up easy, do you?" I said to the air. From somewhere in the dark, a calm voice answered. "Mr. Fisk doesn't like unknown variables in his city." I turned. A man in a tailored black suit stepped out of the shadows, holding a cane. He wasn't Fisk, but he dressed like one of his top lieutenants, clean, confident, expensive. He looked me over. "You're a strange one." "I get that a lot. Mr. Fisk wants peace in his streets. You're not peaceful." I chuckled. Heh, funny. His idea of peace usually involves a body count. The man didn't deny it. "You're strong. He'd rather recruit you than kill you." "Not interested." "He pays well." "Still not interested." The man sighed softly. "Then I'm afraid you're going to be a problem." "Yeah," I said. "That's the idea." He raised a small signal device and pressed it. From the rooftops, more men appeared, a dozen this time, armed with tasers and tranquilizer rifles. I tilted my head. "You sure you brought enough?" "Let's find out," he said coldly. They fired. The air filled with darts and sparks. I spun, bones flashing into place around me in a red circle. Every dart hit the barrier and fell, sizzling on contact. I teleported forward, appearing in front of the lieutenant before he could move. My hand grabbed his tie, pulling him close enough that the red glow reflected in his sunglasses. "Tell your boss if he wants me gone," I said quietly. "He can ask me himself." He tried to swing the cane. I caught it midair and snapped it in half. His breath hitched. I shoved him backward hard enough to knock him down, then turned to the rooftop men. Still wanna play? They hesitated. One fired anyway. I raised my hand. A blaster appeared and fired back, hitting the ledge near him. The explosion sent him tumbling over the edge. I caught him mid-fall with a bone platform, then dropped him safely to the ground. See, I'm nice when I try. The others finally broke and ran. The lieutenant struggled to his feet, eyes wide. You think this scares him? Heh, don't care what scares him. I stepped closer, my tone flat. But I ain't leaving his city, so he better get used to me. He didn't answer. I turned away, the glow from my eye fading as I walked into the dark. Behind me, the man yelled into his earpiece, voice shaking. He's not human. He's something else. The night swallowed the sound before it could follow me. Chapter 6. Mercenaries in the Kitchen. Walked the same route I had the night before. The streets in Hell's Kitchen held onto heat and noise, even after midnight. Windows were open. Music leaked into the air in short bursts. Cars rolled slow, stopping too long at corners. The haze from the last few days sat low along the buildings. It made everything look tired. I kept my hands in my pockets and let the hood sit back so the glow in my eye was plain. People looked, then looked away. New York liked to pretend it had seen everything. Heh, let's see what the big man sends, I said quietly. My voice stayed low and rough. The sound fit the street. I cut across 10th and slid into a narrower block where the pavement dipped. A bar door was propped open with a busted stool. Two men argued under a fire escape. A bus rumbled far off, slow. I could feel eyes on me that weren't curious. They were measuring. They were the same kind of eyes I had felt last night. I stopped beside a stack of pallets. The wood smelled like old rain. My skull tilted a little, and I turned toward a dark sedan that had idled the last minute at the curb. The back door opened. James Wesley stepped out first, calm and neat, tie straight, cane tapping once against the ground as he rounded the door. He had a soft smile that never reached his eyes. He stayed a safe distance. "Good evening," he said pleasantly. "Mr. Fisk asked me to extend his regards." I stared at him. "Heh, thought your boys already did that yesterday." "Yes, and thank you for sending them back breathing," he said. "That was considerate." He gestured slightly with two fingers. 3 SUVs eased in from both ends of the block and stopped. Engines cut. Doors opened in clean sequence. Men in dark tactical gear stepped out and formed 2 lines. No yelling, no posturing. These weren't street soldiers. Their rifles were short, fitted with suppressors. Some carried compact launchers. A few had square packs along their belts, the kind that held tools instead of magazines. Wesley watched me watch them. "We prefer to avoid a public spectacle. These men are discreet, loyal, professional." I met his eyes. "Heh, sounds expensive." "Mr. Fisk invests where it matters," he said smoothly. "You refused an invitation. He would still rather talk than escalate. We can escort you to an off-site location. Comfortable, private, no handcuffs, just conversation." "Hard pass," I said. He sighed, genuine but light. I expected that. He glanced at the nearest team lead and raised his chin once. "Proceed." The team leader signaled with 2 fingers. A pair moved ahead, light on their feet, each holding a thick cylinder the size of a thermos. They snapped them open and rolled 2 devices along the asphalt. The metal pods rattled to a stop near my shoes. The leader called out, "Non-lethal, on your knees, hands behind your head." I stared at the pods. I could feel the charge building inside them. Sonic, layered with flash, not bad. "Heh, you boys do homework," I said. The leader didn't smile. "One chance." "Nah," I said. They hit the triggers. The pods detonated. The sound was a hard sheet that pushed at my bones. The light washed white across the block. Windows shivered in their frames. The 2 men under the fire escape ducked behind a dumpster, swearing. I didn't move. I let the force hit, measured it, and dropped my heel an inch. Red bones rose from the pavement between me and the line of rifles, tight and angled. The sonic blast broke across them and scattered sideways. I felt it in my joints as a dull buzz. My eye flared once and steadied. The leader's jaw set. Level 2. 3 of them fired foam canisters in quick sequence. The containers burst into expanding nets that hardened fast, a thick polymer that turned to a shell in under a second. The first spread across my chest and arms. I flexed and held still to feel the tension. It tried to bite down and lock. It wasn't weak. I grinned. Heh. Then I snapped my fingers. The red energy that pulsed through my joints surged into the foam. It cracked along well-defined lines, like ice that had been waiting for a path. I rolled my shoulders once and let the pieces drop. They hit the street in wide chunks. Level 3, the leader barked. They fired taser rounds and darts. The electricity bit across my jacket and danced for a second. I took one step forward. The nearest rifleman flinched. I lifted my right hand. A red bone spear formed with a steady glow. I pointed it down and dragged the tip across the asphalt as I walked. It left a shallow line and a thin hiss. The men didn't like that sound. Last call, I said. You got somewhere to be, or you want a nap here. The 2 on my left went low, spreading out. The launcher man brought up a bulkier tube and aimed at my feet. He fired. The round burst into a series of weighted cables that flung themselves like snakes. They wrapped my shins and tightened immediately, humming with current. I stepped back once, more to see how it pulled than out of need. The hum climbed in pitch. The weights dug into the pavement. They were trying to anchor me. I laughed quietly. Heh, strong. Then I moved. One blink and I wasn't there. The cable snapped taut and whipped empty air. I reappeared behind the line, close enough that I could see the stubble on the neck of the nearest man. He spun. I tapped his rifle with the bone spear and let the energy bleed into the metal. The gun seized, barked smoke, and died. I palmed him in the chest and pushed. He went down, breath gone. The line broke and then reformed fast. They were trained. They rotated and crossed fields of fire without hitting each other. Tasers snapped like hard rain. I raised a hand and spread my fingers. A red plane formed and took the hits. The arcs crawled across it and burned out. Wesley didn't move. He stayed near the car with the door open, watching calmly, phone in one hand. 3 more vehicles slipped into place on the far end. Another unit disembarked. Their gear was different. Each carried a rectangle case with 2 handles. They spread and set the boxes down, flipped latches, and drew out folded metal frames that snapped into shape with a quick crack of joints. They were deployment shields, thick and glossy, with built-in emitters at the top edge. They set them up and stepped behind. The emitters hummed. A faint shimmer rose, like heat over a grill. The leader lifted his hand. Containment grid. I watched the shimmer build. The grid spread out, invisible until it hit the curb and crawled along it in a soft line like a clear wall being drawn. The air felt tight. The pressure pushed at my jacket. Cute trick, I said. Narrow field, high frequency, the leader called. Stay within the circle and you're fine. Try to cross, you'll feel it. I stepped forward to test it. The shimmer pushed against the bone of my shin with a dull pressure and an electrical bite. It tried to lock onto my energy signature. It wasn't comfortable. I stepped back. Heh, okay. The leader nodded once to himself like he had won a point. You're contained. We move in, we put you down clean. No collateral. I shrugged. That what he told you, put me down clean. That's the job. I looked past him at Wesley. He watched me without blinking, reflecting nothing. He raised the phone to his ear and spoke into it quietly. He was reporting. He never stopped reporting. I rolled my shoulders. My eye brightened. The red light crawled down my arms and pooled in my palms. All right, my turn, I said. I closed my left fist. The red plane in front of me vanished. In its place, 6 compact blasters popped into existence along a line from hip to shoulder, hovering, each locked to a target. The laser sight glow from their tips dotted helmets and plates. The men stiffened. The leader shouted, "Down." I didn't fire at them. I fired at the street. 6 blasts hammered the asphalt in a clean arc. The shock knocked dust up in a wave and blew a trench along the line of shields. The emitters shook and lost sync for half a second. That half second was enough. I blinked. One short step through space, and I was past the grid, near the second unit on the flank. Two of them swung their frames to block me. I hit them with the flat of a red bone and sent them skidding into the side of an SUV. The hood dented with a sharp pop. I snapped my fingers. More bones rose from the street in quick pillars that pushed men gently out of their firing positions and pinned weapons to walls without touching flesh. The rifles were trapped. The men were not. I kept it that way. One of the mercenaries pulled a small drum from his vest and flung it at my head. It burst midair into a cloud of grey powder that ignited a millisecond later. The heat flared bright. I raised my forearm and let it wash across the bone. It blackened and then flaked off. I lowered my arm. "Try again," I said. He tried. He ran at me with a collapsible baton crackling blue. I blocked with my forearm and then brought my other hand down on his shoulder with control. He went limp and slid to the ground with a groan. I felt the grid hum rise behind me. They were trying to reframe it around my new position. I moved before it sealed. One blink. I appeared 2 steps from Wesley. He didn't flinch. He looked up from the phone, met my single red eye, and spoke softly into the receiver. "He's here." I tilted my head. "Heh, you calm for a guy about to get his suit wrinkled." "I don't run," he said pleasantly. I leaned a bit closer. "You should." A shadow shifted down the block. Another SUV had stopped short and sat low on its shocks. The rear hatch opened. The man who got out moved like the car had offended him by stopping. Broad frame, straight posture, dark suit cut to his size. No tie, clean white shirt. He stepped into the street, and the men around him drew breath without meaning to. Wilson Fisk didn't shout. He didn't need to. He walked toward us with his hands at his sides and his eyes steady. He stopped 8 feet away and looked me up and down with simple focus, not fear, not confusion. Wesley stepped aside at once. "Sir." Fisk set his gaze on me and let a beat pass. His voice was even. "You destroyed property that does not belong to you. You put my men in the hospital. You disrupted a block that I am working to stabilize." I studied him. "Heh, you sent them. They pointed guns at me. You got the order of things backward." "I asked you for a conversation," he said. "You sent a convoy," I replied. He breathed once through his nose. "You are unusual. I respect unusual strengths. I would rather add them to my city than remove them. But if your answer is still no, then I will do what I must to protect what is mine." I let the glow in my eye settle into a tighter point. "Protect. That what you call it when you choke a neighborhood until it pays you to breathe." He didn't blink. "I call it order. This city is in pain. It needs structure. It needs a strong hand. You are chaos." I smiled. "Heh, I am me." He watched my hands. The men around us adjusted their grips again. I kept my hands open and visible. "You can walk away from this block tonight," Fisk said calmly. "You can fade into the city and pretend it is not your concern. No one will chase you. Not tonight. Or you can stand here and make an enemy you do not want." "You think you're that big?" I asked softly. "I know what I am," he said. I tilted my skull. I could feel Daredevil City in the way Fisk said the word mine. It wasn't a speech. It was a habit. I shrugged, offered Denneed. Wesley spoke without looking at me. "Understood." He flicked 2 fingers at the leader. The teams shifted formation. They didn't aim center mass this time. They aimed at knees, elbows, and the back of my neck. Their fire would be timed. I could hear the clicks as safeties moved. I could feel their breath change. I didn't wait. I stepped sideways through space and reappeared within arm's reach of Fisk. I didn't touch him. I raised my hand, palm up, and let a little red energy pool there so the light reflected under his chin. Wesley's hand went to his jacket. The leader shouted. The men readied to fire. Fisk lifted his right hand slightly, palm down. They froze. We stood like that for a quiet second. I kept my voice even. I don't kill if I don't need to. I don't put holes in people for fun. But if you keep sending them, I will start breaking things you care about, not bodies, systems. Fisk looked into my single eye. You speak like a man who has already chosen a side. I did, I said. Mine. His jaw moved once. You will not survive long on that side. We'll see. I closed my hand. The light vanished. I stepped back 2 paces without blinking away. I wanted him to see my steps. Fisk raised his chin 1/2 inch. Wesley. Yes, sir, Wesley answered. Stand down. The leader swallowed. Sir. Fisk didn't look at him. Stand down. Weapons lowered in a slow wave. Bodies loosened. The block exhaled. Fisk watched me. I do not escalate on impulse. You have shown restraint twice. I will give you one warning. Do not touch my business. Do not interfere with my contracts. Do not harm my men again. I gestured at the broken cable weights on the ground. Tell them to stop shooting me. I will tell them to stop wasting ammunition, he said. I smirked. Hey. He turned slightly, scanning the windows. People were filming. Phones glinted at the edges. He didn't like that. He didn't show it, but he didn't like that. Wesley, he said softly. Wesley was already on the phone, voice quiet and precise, telling drivers to reroute, telling a cleanup crew to arrive, telling someone to watch the corner cameras. His eyes stayed on me the whole time. Fisk met my gaze one last time. This is my city, he said. Remember that. Noted, I said. He nodded once to himself, then walked back to his SUV without looking behind him. The men parted for him, then folded back into position. Doors shut. Engines started. The vehicles pulled out, one by one, with clean timing. The streets sank into a thinner kind of quiet. Wesley lingered a moment longer. He adjusted his cuff, the corner of his mouth lifting. You are interesting, he said. You're polite. Good night, he said. He stepped into the car and closed the door. The SUV rolled away without a squeal. I stood alone again. The broken foam shells lay near the curb. The cut cable weights twitched, then stopped. The sonic pods were scorched and cracked. A guy across the street who had been pretending to smoke finally let out his breath and hustled back inside his building. The 2 men under the fire escape had disappeared. I looked up at the rooftops. A figure crouched 3 floors up on the next block, red suit still. He didn't move. He listened. You could say hi, I called. Daredevil didn't answer. He stayed still, listening for more engines that weren't coming. I could feel his attention on the shift of my weight, the soft click of my bones settling. After a moment, he disappeared across the roofline without a sound. I bent and picked up one of the foam chunks. It had hardened clean, no bubbles. Someone had put money into this tech. I rolled it in my fingers and set it down again. A siren wailed in the distance, then drifted the other way. I stuck my hands back in my pockets and started walking. I took the long way around the block, past the diner from last time. The bell over the door gave a thin ring when somebody left. The old waiter saw me through the glass and gave a small nod. I nodded back. 2 corners later, I stopped and stood on the edge of a loading bay. The cement was cool. The wind off the river carried the smell of salt and exhaust. I rested my shoulders against the steel door and let my eye dim until it was a low glow. I thought about the lines of force from the grid and the timing on the non-lethal sequence. I thought about the way Fisk had walked and how he had said mine. I thought about Daredevil's breath lifting when I had stepped near Fisk. I thought about the way the mercs moved and who trained them. Clean, I said. A cat walked along the edge of the loading bay, tail up. It stared at me for a second and then continued, uninterested. I watched it go and pushed off the door. I walked 3 blocks west, cut north, and took the stairs up to a parking deck that sat half-lit. The top level was mostly empty. A lone sedan idled with its lights off. When I stepped into view, the lights flicked on for a second and then off again, a signal. I didn't need a signal, but I walked anyway. The driver's window rolled down. The man inside wore an NYPD jacket without patches. His face was tight. He had been waiting. He looked at my skull, swallowed, and held out a folded piece of paper. "For who?" I asked. He licked his lips. "For whoever you are. I was told to give this if I saw you. They said you'd walk this route. They said you'd notice the car." They. He shrugged, nervous. "Guy with a voice like a machine. Just give me your hand so I can pass the paper and go." I took the paper. He drove out without another word. I opened it. The message was printed cleanly. No name, no fluff, just an address and a time. An old warehouse near the river, 2 hours from now. The note ended with a line that read simply neutral ground. I laughed low. "Heh, you just can't help yourself, big man." I folded the note and slid it into my jacket. I looked at the empty roof of the deck and then at the river lights. I could go. I could skip it. I could walk into the river and keep walking. Instead, I stood a while longer and listened to the city breathe. An hour later, I moved. I didn't walk to the warehouse. I blinked in steps, 1 block at a time, keeping the rhythm casual. The air near the river was damp. The warehouse was an old brick shell with updated locks. A single lamp lit the loading dock. 2 men stood there with their hands visible. They were tense but not jumpy. One had a bandage at his hairline. He had been in the line earlier. He didn't meet my eye. They didn't speak to me. They keyed the lock and opened the door. I walked inside. The big space was bare except for a simple table near the center with a white cloth over it and 2 chairs. There were no crates, no hanging chains, no shadows hiding extra men. The only sound was the hum of a refrigeration unit on the far wall that had nothing in it. Wesley sat in one chair. He rose when I came near and gestured to the other chair. "Thank you for coming." I didn't sit. "Hey, he finally wants the chat." "Yes," Wesley said. "Mr. Fisk is on his way. He prefers to arrive slightly after his guests. It gives people time to settle their nerves." "I don't have nerves," I said. "So I've noticed," he said. I paced 2 steps and stopped where the light overhead fell square. Wesley watched the exact placement of my feet and then smoothed his tie. The door opened again. Fisk walked in and closed it himself. No entourage, no show. He took the other chair and rested his big hands on the table, fingers spread, palms flat. "Thank you," he said. I didn't answer. "We will keep this short," he went on. "You are not going to join me, I accept that. But you are here and you are not leaving soon. I accept that for now as well. I do not want this war. It will turn this neighborhood into another battlefield. I will not have that." "You should talk to your hands then," I said. He nodded once. "I will pull the heavier teams out of Hell's Kitchen for the next week. Your face will not be on their lists. You, in turn, will avoid my construction sites, my shipments, and my banks. 1 week. No contact. No interference. If you break this, I will escalate in a way that will be costly for everyone." Wesley slid a small pack across the table. Inside were 2 phones, disposable, clean. He spoke without flourish. "One for you. One stays here. At the end of the week, we can revisit. If you wish to call sooner, you may." I looked at the pack, then at Fisk. "Heh, you want me to play nice. I want to see whether you mean what you say about not killing where you do not have to," he said. "I do." "Then we test that," he said, "for 1 week." I reached out and took 1 phone. It was heavier than it looked. I slid it into my pocket and let the red light in my eye dim. Fisk stood. "Good night." "Night," I said. He left the way he came. Wesley watched me a second longer and then followed. I stood alone in the quiet again. I looked at the empty table. I lifted the cloth's edge and let it fall back into place. Then I left the warehouse by the roof hatch, climbed the iron ladder 3 flights up, and stepped into the cooler air. I crossed the rooftops until the hum of the river was just a sound in the distance. The city stretched out, restless as ever. I dropped down into a narrow alley near a laundromat with a light that stuttered every 9 seconds. I counted the flickers without thinking. I sat on the back steps and leaned against the rail. The glow in my eye settled into a thin line. I closed the other socket and let the quiet sit. 5 minutes later, there was the soft thump of a landing beside me. Daredevil didn't touch the rail. He stood with his head tilted toward me, expression unreadable under the mask. "You met him," he said. "Yeah," I said. "He's loud without raising his voice." "He'll use that week to move money and adjust routes," Daredevil said. "He'll say he's pulling back. He won't. He'll change how he touches the city, not how much." "Heck, I know," I said. "You could have escalated," he said. "Wasn't worth it," I said. "Not tonight." He nodded once firm. "Good." We stayed quiet for a few seconds. He turned his head toward the street. "You made a mess, but you kept most of them out of the hospital." "I like my messes neat," I said. "Keep it that way," he said and stepped away. He paused. "You're not bad at this." "I'm good at this," I said. He didn't argue. He left the way he came, silent, sure. I leaned back and let the night breathe. A washer on the other side of the wall vibrated. The building hummed. I listened to it work and let the red eye dim and brighten, steady and slow. I sat until the first hint of grey lined the edges over the roofs. Then I stood up, rolled my shoulders, and started walking again. "Heh, 1 week," I said. I put my hands in my jacket and moved toward the glow of the diner sign coming alive again. The bell above the door would be tired. The coffee would be hot. The old waiter would nod. The city would complain. Fisk would plan. Daredevil would listen. I would be here. And if someone forgot the deal, I would remind them. I pushed off the railing and headed into the street. Chapter 7. Red ledger, black suit. Morning came in pale strips across the buildings. The city crews were still clearing rubble 2 blocks over. I stood on a rooftop above the kitchen, jacket open, hands in my pockets. My eye settled in a low glow. The air tasted like dust and exhaust. A soft footfall landed behind me. No scrape, no clatter. I didn't turn. "Romanoff," I said. "Morning," she replied calmly. I looked over my shoulder. Natasha stood by the ledge, hair tied back, jacket zipped, holster clipped to her belt. She watched me without blinking, reading the way I held my shoulders and the set of my jaw. She always did that first. "You said you'd be around," she said evenly. "Heh, you gonna pin a tracking collar on me?" I asked. She didn't smile. "Fury wants me to watch you." "Watch away," I said, "but I want something back." Her head tilted a fraction. "What do you want?" "Information," I said. "You watch me, I get a look at something from SHIELD. "That depends on the something," she replied. "Fisk," I said. "You have files, addresses, schedules. You wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't." She looked at my hands, then lifted her gaze. "You made a deal with him last night." "Heh," he made noise. I listened, I said. "You agreed to a week," she said. "He'll use the week to move cash and people," I said. "I don't need a week." She watched my eye brighten and dim once. She reached into her jacket slowly, never making me feel crowded. She pulled a folded paper from an inner pocket and held it out. "This isn't an official handoff," she said. "If anyone asks, this never happened." I took the paper. "Sure." "It's not everything," she added. "It's enough for you not to walk into a wall." I unfolded it. The map was printed in clean lines and small text. It marked a penthouse office on the west side with secondary exits, a maintenance shaft, a private elevator, 2 safe rooms, and an off-site garage with a tunnel connection. There were notes in the margins. Wesley's usual arrival window. Evening security shift overlaps. Camera blind spots that didn't happen by accident. I looked up at her. "Heh, you do good work." She leaned one hip against the short wall and crossed her arms loosely. "We've been watching him for a long time." "You gonna tell me not to go?" I asked. "I'm going to say if you break your word in an obvious way, Fisk will respond." He'll use the response to make himself look like the injured party. He's good at that, she said. I don't care about his feelings, I said lightly. This isn't about feelings, she said. It's about leverage. Don't give him a story he can use. I slid the paper into my jacket. Heh, I'll keep it quiet. She pushed away from the ledge and stepped closer, chin up, eyes steady. I'm going to be nearby. Do what you want, I said. She glanced toward the river. Stark asked me to tell you he still wants readings. He can wait, I said. She nodded once. He figured you'd say that. She paused. One more thing. If this goes bad, I don't take your side just because we talked. I wasn't counting on it, I said. She looked relieved for a second, which was rare for her. Then it was gone. She turned and walked to the edge, clipped a line without looking, and stepped off. The cable whispered. She was gone. I stood on the roof alone, the paper warm in my pocket from my own energy. I took it out again and stared at the lines. The office was in a tower that didn't advertise Fisk's name. The floor plan sat like it belonged to a bank. The safe room had a double-door design with a short hall and a vent that wasn't on the usual schematics. The maintenance shaft connected to a service corridor that ran to a garage under a facing building with a private exit to a one-lane alley. The notes included the brand of the elevator control board and the factory override code pattern. Not the code, just the pattern. Hey, of course, I said. I folded the paper and tucked it away. I didn't wait for night. I didn't wait for any window. I left the rooftop and moved in short steps through space, one blink at a time, sticking to shadows and gaps between cameras. I didn't rush. The calm mattered more than speed. 2 blocks from the tower, I dropped into an alley and listened. Traffic moved slow around the corner. A doorman called a cab for someone and then cursed at a driver who stopped too close to the curb. A delivery cart rattled. The building's lobby doors opened and closed in a steady rhythm. Security radios crackled with dull chatter about a plumbing issue on 9. I walked out of the alley and into the front doors like I belonged. Eyes tracked me. Hands twitched. I kept my head forward, my glow low, my steps even. The marble floor reflected light in flat squares. The first guard at the desk straightened. Sir. Heh, elevator, I said lazily, pointing. This is a private building, he said firmly. If you have an appointment. Yeah, I said, with the man upstairs. 2 more guards stepped from their posts near the pillars. Their hands hovered near their belts. I stopped moving. I kept my hands clear and open. The first guard lifted a phone, spoke quickly, listened, and then went pale. Sir, he said, voice tight now, please wait here. No, I said. I walked past the desk. The 2 guards moved to block me. I teleported between them without touching a shoulder and hit the elevator call with the back of my hand. A woman carrying a stack of files squeaked and pressed herself against the wall. The guard nearest me drew his baton. The other put a hand to his earpiece and started talking fast. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I stepped inside and faced forward. 1 guard lunged. I put up a red pane the size of a door and let him smack into it chest first. The doors slid shut. I dropped the pane and pressed the highest floor shown. The display said 52. The paper in my pocket said there was a panel for a hidden 53. The car hummed up, numbers blinking past. A camera lens looked down from the corner. I looked back until I knew someone on the other end felt it. My eye brightened a touch. The elevator didn't stop early. Either they couldn't override quickly, or someone in the building had orders to let me come. The doors opened to a quiet lobby. The carpet here was thick enough to dull my footsteps. A receptionist desk sat empty, a lamp left on. A glass wall showed a view of the river. 1 security camera sat in a place where an amateur would put it. The real cameras were set into the trim, almost invisible. I saw their lenses as dots. I walked left. The paper in my pocket had the exact count of ceiling panels from the elevator to the access panel, 12. I stopped under the 12th. I reached up with my right hand and pushed a red bone tip between the seam. The panel shifted. I caught it before it could clang. Wires and the back of ductwork filled the shallow space. I didn't need them. I needed the latch 3 feet back that released the false wall near the end of the hall. I slid the bone forward carefully until it touched metal. I pressed. A small click answered from the wall. I set the panel back and walked the rest of the way. At the dead end, a section of wall had popped a 1/4 inch. I got my fingers on the edge and pulled. The false wall swung inward silently and revealed a narrow hall that ran to a second elevator with no buttons, no lights, just a card reader and a small keypad barely visible. I took the paper out and studied the digits in the margin. Not the code, the pattern, a 2x2 rotation keyed to the day of the week and the hour. I watched the way the red light from my eye spilled across the keys. I did the calculation in my head and tapped the sequence quickly. The keypad flashed green. The elevator door slid open. I stepped in. There were no floor buttons. A small slot sat at waist height. I slid the map into my pocket again and pressed my palm flat to the panel under the slot. Nothing. I tapped the panel with a red bone tip. The thin energy kiss danced across the contact. The panel beeped. The car moved. It rose a single floor and stopped. The doors opened to a narrow vestibule and a steel door with a heavy latch. A small camera sat above it. "Wilson," I said, so the mic would pick it up. My voice stayed low and amused. "You home?" The steel door unlocked. It didn't open. I pulled it. The hinges were greased. It swung smooth. The office beyond ran long and wide with a view that swallowed entire blocks. The walls were plain. One stood bare with a single painting. The desk sat clean, with pens aligned and a leather blotter that had no scratches. Wesley sat near the window at a small table with 2 chairs. A cup of coffee steamed. A second cup sat untouched. He looked up and smiled the way he always smiled. "Good morning," he said. "You came quickly." "Your girl asked me to," I said. "She's not my girl," he said. "But yes, she has her own goals." "Where is he?" I asked. "Not here," Wesley said. "He knew you would come." I walked further in, steps soft on the floor. I passed the desk and stopped with a clear view of the room. No obvious turrets, no slits for gas. The vents were standard, the windows likely armored. The small seams in the baseboards gave the safe room away on the right. The painting on the wall looked familiar from reports. A white field with raised texture, clean and expensive. "He running?" I asked. "He is working," Wesley said. "He asked me to offer you coffee." I looked at the cup and then at him. "Heh, you think this is cute." "I think this is practical," he said. I moved to the window and looked down at the river for a second. Boats moved slow. A tow pushed a barge with scrap from the alien fight. The cranes along the piers turned methodically. I turned back. "You built a nice nest," I said. "Would be a shame if someone threw it in the river." Wesley's smile thinned. "No one benefits from that kind of damage." "I do," I said. "It makes my morning." He shifted in his chair slightly. "You are not going to kill Mr. Fisk." "I decide what I do," I said. "Of course," he replied politely. "But the result of that choice is predictable. This city will bleed. The wrong people will take his place. You will be very busy for a very long time." "You think I can't handle busy?" I asked. "I think you prefer to win," he said. I set my hand on the back of the empty chair across from him and leaned in a little. "Tell me where he is." Wesley didn't blink. "No." I looked at his coffee. "Heh, you always this stubborn before lunch." "Always," he said. I pulled the chair out and sat. My bones clicked softly against the wood. My eye glow set a thin red line across the tabletop. "You handed me a map," I said. "You opened the door. You wanted me here." "I wanted to confirm your intent," he said. "Now I have." "You get what you need?" I asked. "For the moment," he said. I turned my head toward the painting. "You know, this thing gets torn in a fight, and you are going to be very upset." Wesley followed my gaze without moving his head. "We protect important things." I walked to the painting. I stopped with my shoulder nearly touching the frame and scanned the seam between wall and canvas. There was a fine strip of sensors under the hanging rail. Not motion, temperature, air movement. If the canvas falls, doors close. Hey, overbuilt, I said. It is adequate, Wesley said. I took a step back and looked at the safe room seam again. The door would be inside that wall. The short corridor beyond would have a second door at the end and a dead zone in the middle for anyone who forces the first. The ventilation panel was above that dead zone. The paper's margin note had said the duct had a sound baffle halfway. A human could not fit. A bone could. I flexed my fingers. The red energy ran down the tendons like clear water. I pulled it back in. I looked at Wesley. You want a week of quiet, I said. We appreciate any period of calm, he said. I laughed softly. Heh, then tell your boss I kept my hands off his systems and his money like I said. I came to talk. You are in his office, Wesley said. Talking, I said. He considered that for a beat. He will not appreciate the distinction. He can send me a letter, I said. Wesley's eyes flicked to a small desk unit near the window. It wasn't a regular phone. It was a line. I could hear it hum differently. He was waiting for it to ring. It didn't. I moved to the desk and opened the center drawer. Pens, stapler, a small notebook with dates and rectangles filled neatly with numbers. I flipped it open. Shipping times, driver numbers, dock assignments, not the top-level list, the day list. Wesley stood. Please do not take that. Herr, you said please, I said. He kept his hands visible. If you remove that, I will have to make a call. The person on the other end will not be as patient as I am. I looked at the notebook's current page. I scanned the entries and memorized the sequence. I set the notebook back in the drawer and closed it. Wesley relaxed a fraction. Thank you. I opened the next drawer. Files. Plain folders with no labels on the tabs. The first held invoices from a shell company tied to a building supply firm I had seen in SHIELD's notes. The numbers moved between 3 entities and ended at a bank with a branch in Newark. I flipped 2 more, the same pattern with different names. I closed the drawer and sat on the edge of the desk. Tell him I will hit the shipments if he breaks the deal. Wesley's mouth twitched. You just said you wouldn't touch his systems. If he holds the week, I won't, I said. If he doesn't, I will cut straps and leave his crates where the air can see them. You are very sure of your control, he said. Always, I said. The line by the window clicked. Wesley looked at it and then at me. He stepped over and lifted the receiver. Yes, he said quietly. He listened. He's here. He listened again. Understood. He set the phone down. He is not coming. He is occupied. Shame, I said. He said to give you a message, Wesley added. He can write his own, I said. Wesley ignored that. He said, for 1 week the sites stand down. No heavy teams, no broad sweeps. If you show restraint, he continues to hold them back. If you force his hand, he will close his hand. Hey, poetic, I said, and then I corrected myself. Dramatic talk, I mean. Wesley's brow tightened for a second. He covered it with a small smile. He asked me to also remind you that SHIELD will not catch him for you. I don't need them, I said. I suspect that is true, he said. I pushed off the desk and walked to the safe room seam. I lifted my hand and paused. Don't panic, I said. We don't panic, he replied. I slid a thin red bone probe into the seam at knee height and let it trace the edge in a careful line. I felt the latch with the tip. I didn't trip it. I pulled back out. You know I can get in if I want, I said. I assumed, he said. Good, I said. Tell him to fix his duct baffle. It rattles. Wesley's eyes didn't move. I'll make a note. I turned from the wall and crossed to the vestibule door. I looked back at the painting once and then at the river. I felt the building under my feet and the city beyond it. I kept my voice calm. 1 week, I said. After that, if he is still pushing people, we move a different way. Wesley adjusted his cuff. I'll deliver it exactly. I stepped into the elevator. The door slid shut. The car dropped 1 floor and opened to the hall. I pushed the false wall back into place and walked down the carpet without hurry. I stepped into the open elevator lobby and hit the button for the ground floor. On the way down, the car stopped at 30. The doors opened. Natasha stepped in. She stood beside me with her arms loose at her sides and her eyes on the numbers over the door. A faint scent of cordite hung around her jacket. She didn't look at me. You kept it quiet, she said. He wasn't home, I said. That's home enough, she replied. I snorted softly. Hey. She glanced at my jacket pocket. You didn't take anything. Didn't need to, I said. Good, she said. Legal chains are delicate. If you pull too hard, they snap and hit someone else. I don't do courts, I said. I know, she said, but some of us have to. She faced me then. You go for him, you will start a fight the whole city will feel. Keep picking at the edges. You're good at that. I watched the numbers. You sound like you want him off the board. I want the city intact, she said simply. The doors opened to the ground floor. The lobby had reset to polite. The receptionist was back. The guards watched me from the edges. No one moved to stop us. Natasha walked with me to the revolving doors and pushed into the street. I followed. The morning had a humid feel. Traffic noises bounced off the glass. She stood by the curb with her hands in her pockets, looking at the tower like it was a person who needed to be told to behave. Fury asked me to say thank you for not making us clean up a mess, she said. Heh, tell him to stop making messes first, I said. She smirked a little. I'll pass it along. I stepped off the curb. She matched me without asking. We walked to the corner and stopped at the light. A bus hissed past and rolled to a stop. A kid inside pointed at me with wide eyes and then pressed his hands against the glass. His mom tugged him back, smiling nervously. I lifted 2 fingers in an easy wave. The kid laughed. You draw attention, Natasha said. Not my problem, I said. It becomes mine, she said, dry. Enjoy your job, I said. She took a breath and let it out slow. I'll be around. If you hit his shipments after the week, tell me first. Why? I asked. So I can make sure the trucks you cut open aren't carrying anything that poisons the street, she said. He hides dirty payloads in clean boxes. I can tell, I said. Still, she said, tell me. Heck, maybe, I said. She nodded and stepped back from the curb. Stay out of sight for an hour. Let the building finish logging your face. I looked at her, amused. You think they don't have my face already? They do, she said. Let them finish panicking. I turned up the block. See you, Red. See you, she said quietly. I walked until the tower was a shape behind the other shapes. I cut through an alley with damp brick and graffiti lines. I climbed a short ladder to a fire escape and sat on the second landing with my back against the rail. My eye dimmed to a low burn. I pulled the paper back out and studied the other marks. 2 addresses circled, not homes, offices, one near a rail spur, one under a clinic. I folded the paper crisp and slid it home. I counted breaths out of habit, even though I didn't need to. 4 up, 4 down. The city breathed louder than I did. An hour later, I left the landing and moved. I walked to the diner out of reflex. The bell above the door rang once. The old waiter looked up and nodded at me like I had a reservation. I sat at the counter and wrapped my fingers around a mug. The heat soaked in. The TV in the corner showed a news anchor talking about the cleanup. No mention of Fisk. No mention of me. Good. The camera view cut to a shot of Stark Tower with scaffolds going up along one side. The anchor said something about a new advisory board for enhanced incidents. Natasha would hate that. I sipped the coffee anyway. The old waiter leaned in. Heard there were black cars on 12th last night. Heard wrong, I said easily. He chuckled and wiped the counter. City never sleeps, ha. Never, I said. The door opened again. A woman in a suit walked in with a SHIELD badge turned backward on her belt. She bought a pastry to go and left without looking at me. Good tale. I let her go. I finished the coffee and left enough cash to make the old man shake his head. I stepped back into the street and let the heat hit the jacket. The day had a slow tilt to it. People moved like they were tired. I walked that pace and kept my glow low. I spent the afternoon moving through the edges of the kitchen. I stood under tenement windows and listened to the drift of arguments and radios and plates. I stood by the river and watched a tugboat pull a barge with twisted alien metal. I stood by a fenced lot where a forklift beeped as it reversed. I didn't hurry. By evening, my phone buzzed once. Not the SHIELD one, the cheap one from Wesley. I didn't take it out. I let it buzz and stop. I kept walking. Dark settled slow. I climbed 3 flights to a roof with a low wall and a clean view of 2 intersections. I sat on the wall with 1 foot on the gravel. My eye glowed steady. I waited. Natasha arrived without sound again, crouching on the opposite corner. She didn't speak right away. She watched traffic. She watched shadows. She watched me. "You didn't go back," she said. "Not yet," I said. "Good," she said. She stood and walked over, hands loose. "Fury says to tell you he's not your enemy." "Heh, tell him to stop aiming satellites at my head," I said. "He will," she said, which meant he might. She handed me a smaller paper. 3 trucks shift in 2 days. If the week ends with a break, those are good targets. Clean hits, no bystanders. I took the paper and slid it into my jacket. "You always plan this far." "Always," she said. "You." "Always," I said. She looked at my eye and then at my hands. "You look rested. That's strange." "I'm fine," I said flatly. "Good," she said. We watched the street in silence for a few minutes. A siren rose and fell. A dog barked. Someone shouted at a window to turn the TV down. The city made its own music. I let it run through me. She stepped back from the ledge. "I'm checking a warehouse near the river. You coming?" "Later," I said. She nodded. "Don't vanish." "Hey, no promises," I said. She smiled a little and left. I stayed until the last light in the building across from me clicked off. Then I stood and dropped down the fire escape. My boots hit the alley soft. I pulled my hood up and let the glow cut down to a thin line. I walked toward the river with my hands in my pockets and my mind on the clock I just started. 1 week. Enough time to line up the right hits. Enough time to decide how loud to be. Enough time to make sure the next step didn't hand Fisk the story he wanted. I kept moving, chapter 8, block by block. I left the roof before noon. The air over Hell's Kitchen felt heavy. Trucks kept dragging debris out of Midtown. The sound rolled along the avenues. I kept my hands in my pockets and my hood down. My eye burned brighter than usual. I didn't bother to hide it. "Heh, no more strolls," I said. My voice stayed low and dry. I felt steady. I felt ready. I started on 11th, near a repair yard that wasn't on any public map. Natasha's notes had marked it with a hand-drawn square. Fisk's people moved weapons and cash through there when they wanted to look small. The fence was new and tall. The razor wire was real. 2 cameras scanned in staggered arcs. A man in a plain jacket smoked by the side door and pretended not to watch the street. I crossed without slowing. The man flicked his cigarette and spoke into his collar. I lifted my left hand and snapped. Red bones burst up along the fence posts and trimmed the wire into neat lengths. The camera mounts froze in place with small cracks of energy and then drooped. The gate held for a second, then sagged when the hinges turned soft under the heat of a hovering blaster. The smoker reached for his gun. I flicked my wrist. A red pain smacked his forearm and sent the pistol skidding. He backed away, hands up, eyes wide. I stepped through the gate and let the bones close it behind me like a lazy swing. 2 more men ran out from the side door with shotguns. They fired. The pellets flattened against a red arc that moved with my steps. I didn't stop. I let a bone rise under each man's feet and lift him until his toes left the ground. The guns fell. I tapped each weapon with the edge of my palm and let the metal lock up with a hiss. I lowered the men to their knees and left them there with their hands on their heads. Inside the yard, a forklift sat with a pallet of crates, the stencils red as machine parts. The weight did not match. I stepped onto the pallet and set my palm against the top crate. The energy under my bone hummed. I felt steel, oil, and dense ceramic. I slid my hand aside, formed a thin blade, and cut clean lines along the nails. The lid came up in a controlled lift. Inside, rifles lay in neat rows. I exhaled slowly. Heh, predictable. I turned my head. A foreman watched from the office window with his phone in his hand. He lowered it when he saw my eye. He looked sick. Relax, I said. I'm not here for you. I planted my palm on the pallet. 6 hovering blasters popped alive over my shoulder, lined in a curve, aimed downward. I fired at the concrete between the crates in a controlled sequence. The shock knocked the stacks apart without sending splinters anywhere near the people. The rifles slid in a tidy spill across the ground. I swept my hand. Red bones rose and pinned barrels to the floor. I cut magazines out with a small gesture. Springs popped and rolled away. The yard went quiet, but for a distant truck horn and the forklift's cooling fan. I turned toward the office. The foreman had his hands up now. Call your boss, I said calmly. Tell him the yard is closed. He nodded quickly. Okay, okay. Good, I said. I stepped back through the gate and let the bones weld the hinges into hard lumps. I kept walking. I cut east to 10th. The next spot sat over a bodega with a broken sign. The back room had a false wall. Behind the false wall was a counting table and a safe bolted to the floor. I didn't pick locks. I put my palm to the safe and sent a slow pulse. The bolts softened. The door slouched on its hinges. I pulled it open. Stacks of cash slumped against each other like damp paper. I stared at them and counted for the rhythm, not because I needed the total. I wanted to feel the cadence of the hall. I reached in and pulled one stack free. I dialed a number from the cheap phone Wesley had given me. He answered in one ring. Yes. Your boys forgot to label the bodega safe, I said lazily. Might want to fix that. Won't matter. A long silence. You move quickly. You told me I had a week. I'm making the most of it. You are breaking the terms, he said, polite and firm. Heh, you broke M first when you set the mercenaries on me, I said. This is me being patient. Another quiet pause. I see. I ended the call. I set the stack of cash on the counting table. I raised my hand. Bones slid up from the floor and arranged the cash in a neat ring. A blaster hummed alive and skimmed above the stacks. I pulsed it on a low heat. The bills fused into a tight block that stuck to the table. The backroom man stood near the doorway, shaking his head. Relax, I said. Go upstairs, take the day off. He ran. I set 2 more stacks into the ring and sealed them. I walked out the front without looking back. The owner watched me go with his mouth open. I lifted a few fingers. Close early, I said. He nodded fast. I crossed 9th and took a left. The clinic front waited in the middle of the block with a banner that said relief. People in actual need walked in and out. I stood across the street and watched for 10 minutes. A woman came out with a bandage on her wrist and a paper bag with a pill bottle shape inside. An old man climbed the steps and held the door for a kid who looked okay. That was real. The back room was not. I went around the block to the loading alley. 2 men unloaded boxes marked sterile. A nurse smoked while leaning against a dumpster. She looked tired. I nodded to her. She stared at my skull for a second, then nodded back like this city taught her to keep moving. I lifted my hand and traced a red line along the concrete at the base of the back wall. The line heated and parted. A panel slid away like a tile. The men froze. Maintenance check, I said, bored. Behind the panel, a tight corridor ran under the clinic to a door with an access pad. I pressed my palm to the metal. It tried to resist. I pressed harder. The lock gave. I opened the door and stepped into a room filled with machines that were not for healing. Compressors hummed. A scrubber rattled. A bank of hard drives blinked near a rack of sealed bags with serial numbers. The smell of antiseptic tried to cover oil and plastic. I turned each machine off in a sequence that would not spike pressure or release smoke. I unplugged the data lines and fed them into a bone rack that formed from the wall. The bone conducted my energy through the cables and into the drives. The lights dimmed and went out as the boards fried along the paths I chose. A guard tried the door. He found it open and stepped in with a pistol. I looked at him. He swallowed. "Leave," I said. He backed out and left. I pulled the coolant lines apart and reconnected them so the system would not rupture when someone tried to restart without checking. I took one sealed bag, peeled the edge back far enough to see the powder color, sealed it again with a thin burn, and set it on the table with a note bone-etched into wood. "Hand to police." I walked out the way I came. The nurse took a drag and raised an eyebrow at me. "Don't worry," I said. "They'll still stitch people up." She exhaled. "Good." I kept moving. I hit a bank drop 3 blocks south. It ran through a dry cleaner. I walked in and asked for starch. The cashier blinked at my skull, then pointed to a rack and told me they were out. I smiled. "Heh, you got more in the back," I said. I walked through the counter gate. The cashier made a small sound and then stayed still. In the back room, 2 men stacked clear bags of cash inside laundry sacks. A third checked a ledger. I raised a red wall between them and the front so the cashier wouldn't see. I slid the ledger toward me with a small tug of energy. It showed times and routes I already knew. I ran my hand over the ink. The dots in the loops warmed and told me the order in which the numbers had been written. I put it back. "You done?" I said, pointing at their sacks. "Take a walk." One man tried to speak. He stopped when my eye brightened. They left. I opened the sacks and let the air in. I sent a short pulse that turned the bands to soft dust. The cash collapsed. I cut the bags open and tied them to the sprinkler line. Then I walked out. The cashier stared open-mouthed. I tossed a 10 on the counter. "Starch," I said, amused. He didn't laugh. He looked like he might want to. He didn't. By late afternoon, I had cleared 6 locations. No sirens came to me. A few unmarked cars cruised slow and then kept going. People on stoops watched. Some filmed. Most pretended to check their phones. I kept my voice to myself and let my bones do the talking only when I needed to. At sunset, I turned toward the rail spur. It ran behind a row of warehouses near the river. The fence buzzed with a faint current. I stepped through without touching it. A small crew worked fast near a boxcar that sat on a short side track. They wore plain clothes and moved like they didn't want to be seen. A forklift pushed a crate toward a ramp. The crate had double walls. I could feel it. I flicked my wrist. Red bones rose under the boxcar's coupler and lifted it. The pin popped with a loud knock. The car rolled a foot and then stopped when a bone brace set itself behind a wheel. The crew froze. A lookout yelled once, high and thin. The sound died when he saw my eye. "Hands up," I said. "Walk away." They didn't move. One reached for a radio. I shook my head. He stopped. I stepped closer and palmed the crate. The outer wall vibrated and then sank. The inside lining glowed where my energy traced the seams. I peeled it back. Under the fake wood, an inner steel wall showed drill marks and fresh screws. I put 2 fingers to the metal and let the current move. The locks failed. The panel swung out. Inside sat packed weapons and sealed tins. I picked one tin up and weighed it. I set it down and formed a tight circle of hovering blasters over the open crate. I fired short bursts around the edges until the rivets failed and the crate sagged open. I swept all the weapons into a pile with a row of bones that came up like a pushing hand. I pinned the pile under a neat cage of red bars. A work light fell and cracked. The forklift operator sat down hard on his heels with both hands in the air. "Call the police," I said. "Tell them to bring a big truck and a boring clerk." One of the men blinked. "A what?" "A clerk," I said. "Someone who logs things." I pointed at his phone. "Call." He called. His voice shook. He kept darting looks at the open crate. When he ended the call, he met my eye and nodded once. I nodded back. I left the rail yard by blinking to the far fence and dropping into the next alley. My eye dimmed a notch. I felt the pull in my bones, not pain, just draw. I walked it off. I headed back toward the heart of the kitchen. A group of teenagers stood outside a bodega arguing about a game. One saw me and went silent. The others followed his eyes and shut up. I lifted a hand and gave a small wave. One waved back with a grin that looked confused. Their voices returned as I turned the corner. They kept it low. I crossed 8th and cut south. The last major base tonight sat 2 levels under a parking garage with an elevator that smelled like oil and garlic. The keypad had a new cover. I didn't touch it. I slid a bone under the top edge and lifted the plate. The screws came with it. I looked at the bundle of wires and breathed out a slow "heh" that made the guard behind me hesitate before he swung his baton. I caught the baton with 2 fingers and set it on the floor. I looked at the guard. He looked young and tired. He reached for pepper spray. I shook my head. He backed away. I held up my palm and sent a thin pulse through the wire harness. The relay clicked. The door opened. Inside, tables sat under bright lights. Men in clean clothes counted cash and stacked chips from an illegal game. A woman with a ledger stood at a high shelf and wrote fast. When they saw me, they all went still. I didn't speak. I raised my hand, and red bones rose from the floor around each table in a set of rings. The rings tightened just enough to block feet. The cash didn't move. The chips didn't fall. I walked to the shelf, took the ledger, flipped it open, read 3 lines, and put it back exactly where it had been. "Go home," I said softly. No one moved. "Now," I said, just as soft. They went. I stood alone with stacks of money that meant nothing to me. I looked at the ceiling and felt the building's weight. I turned off the lights with a thought of red and let the room sit in the glow from my eye. I built a bone door inside the real door and fused it shut in a clean line. That would slow them, not stop. Slow. I checked my pockets. The cheap phone buzzed again. I took it out and looked at the screen. One new message. Unknown number. It read, "Last chance to talk." I smiled to myself. Hey. I put the phone away. I climbed back to street level and stepped into air that had started to cool. People drifted home. The bars started to fill. The buildings sat with their windows open to let the day out. I looked up toward the tower that held Fisk's office. It rose dark against the lights around it. "All right," I said. "Your turn." I didn't go through the front this time. I didn't want to chat with a desk. I blinked along the rooftops and then along the sides of buildings until I was on the glass itself, standing at a place 30 floors up where no one looked. My boots held on red bones that pressed thin against the stone between panes. I walked sideways across the skin of the tower and stopped 2 windows over from a light that burned steady. A security team sat inside with a bank of screens. They didn't look at the one window that showed me as a smear of red. I put my palm on the glass. It warmed. I traced the seal with energy. The glass shifted in its seat. I slid it open without a sound and stepped through. The room smelled like coffee and carpet. The men looked up instinctively, like they had felt air move. They saw me and froze. "Hey," I said. They reached for alarms. I sent a red wave across the boards. The power to the consoles clicked off. I walked past them and opened the door. 2 guards were running toward the office. They saw me. I lifted my hand. The floor under them rose an inch and tilted gently. They slid into the wall with a thump and sat down hard. I passed them and moved into the hall that ran toward the top. No one tried to talk. They just tried to stop me. I didn't give them reasons to get hurt. I put bones in their way and sent their weapons elsewhere. I froze elevator doors with a touch so they couldn't open where I didn't want. I set blasters at the corners and fired into empty walls to collapse panels and reveal the hidden doors. The corridors tried to funnel me. I walked through them anyway. At the last turn, a team in heavy gear waited with shields and shock rods. The captain breathed steady into his mic and called timing. I laughed softly and snapped my fingers. A row of bones erupted behind them and turned the floor into a gentle conveyor that slid the entire line 10 feet sideways. They reformed fast. I respected that. I saluted with 2 fingers and stepped past. They tried to follow. I raised a wall and left them on one side with room to breathe. I reached the vestibule to the office. The steel door showed the stress lines from my visit earlier. Someone had reinforced the back with a second plate. I touched it and sent a slow pulse through. The plate softened across its edges and came away in my hand. I set it on the floor with care. "Knock, knock," I said. I pushed the door. It gave. The office sat quiet again. The painting waited on the wall. The desk sat clean. The view showed the river lights. Wesley stood by the window with his phone in his hand. "You made your point," he said. "Not yet," I said. "Mr. Fisk is not here," he said. "That line is getting old," I said. I walked toward the safe room seam and stopped close enough to see a new hairline along the jamb. They had added a second latch. I smiled. "Heh, you patched the duct." "We learn," he said evenly. I looked at the painting again. I reached up and touched the bottom corner with one fingertip. The sensor tripped at a change in air. The hidden